Hello, everyone, and welcome to the midweek program at the JC Raulston Arboretum. My name is Blake, and I'm the education assistant here. And today we are sat underneath this big and beautiful Ulmus frosty. It is a beautiful tree. It is a wonderful tree. And today we have a wonderful program to you. We are having a horticulture hour. We've got a panel of horticulturists, the hugest panel of horticulturists in the history of the midweek program. We have Greg Paige, our director of horticulture, Sophia McCusker, our nursery technician, Mark Weathington, who's like the director or something like that, Tim Alderton, our research technician, and Dennis Carey, our curator. And today we will be entertaining all of your questions. Those of you joining us live on Zoom, y'all are welcome to drop any questions you have down in the chat, and we will answer them for you with our army of horticulturists here today. Those of you joining us on YouTube, please like this video and subscribe to our channel, and feel free to leave a comment down below. And with the announcements out of the way, we can get started with our horticulture hour for today. And I will remind those of you in the Zoom right now to drop your questions in the chat. We got stuff anyway. It's all good. Actually, Tim, you pulled together a lovely arrangement of flowers here. Are there any particular flowers you want to highlight and talk about?
There's some of the summer bulbs they're amaryllids, so the amaryllis relatives that we have that flower at this time of the year. And I just included a couple different things in there. There's a couple different rain lilies or zephyranthes. And I have a few lycoris, this is the time of year they're in flower, anywhere from, actually, there were some in late June, early July this year. It was earlier than ever. But they'll go right into September, October. And then I have a Hymenacalis here, or spider lily, and one of the crinums, which all of those do their thing throughout the summer months. So I just thought those would be something to quickly highlight there. So, and they're easy. The rain lilies really respond to the rain, as do the crinums and the Hymenacalis. The lycoris are on their own schedule for the most part, and they do their thing in late summer and fall. So.
The rain lilies have been awesome recently with all the rain that we've had. You come by, it's still raining a little bit. They're poking their little heads up, being all kinds of beautiful.
3 to 5 days after a rain, you can expect at least a few, if not a ton of different ones.
For sure.
Right.
And this group of plants, the amaryllids, which think amaryllis, they don't actually bloom at Christmas time. You gotta force them to get that. But like the zephyranthes, the rain lilies, you see the yellow and the white, the small white ones in here. Those are mostly Southwestern and South American, although we have a zephyranthes here native, the Adamasco lily.
Spring flowering one.
Spring, yeah, exactly. And the Hymenacalis is native across a wide range, but we have that here in
this is
Southeast.
Tropical giant, so I think that's a Caribbean one.
That's a Caribbean one. So they're really widespread. And for members of the Arboretum, be on the lookout because we did some collecting in Uruguay this spring, their fall, and we've got a lot of zephyranthes species down there. So those might be distributed.
Nice.
There's some other bulbs that are pretty neat, like the Herbertias, which look like funky little irises and things. So there's going to be more of those. And, we always think of bulbs as narcissus and daffodils and tulips and things like that. But
so many that are great for the summer.
Yeah.
But that's a hot tip for you. Become a member of the Arboretum to get access to some of the newest plants on the continent, even, really. But I think we can go ahead and get started with some questions. We have a question from Carolyn right out of the gate. She says that her male Winterberries leaves look like lace. They are so badly chewed up. She wants to know if she should cut them back to where the new growth is coming out. She wants to know if she should fertilize it. What should she do?
Don't fertilize.
We're
getting kind of late in the year for fertilizer. More than likely, it's an insect. So I don't know if I would prune them back either. I would just kind of, this is the time of the year when things in the garden start to look a little bit shaggy. So you don't want to do anything real drastic like prune or fertilize. I would just kind of wait and see. There are some skeletonizing leaf insects that will affect them this time of the year. There's some caterpillars and sawflies that are out and crawling about. So that's more than likely what it is. And it's really not going to cause a lot of damage to the plant at this point. It's more of an aesthetical thing right now.
Yeah, mine are kind of shredded at my house, and I'm not doing anything with them.
We're getting into that time of the year.
Sure enough.
When things are kind of shaggy.
And hey, that's a deciduous holly anyway, so it'll take care of itself over the long term.
Exactly.
All righty. Bob wants to know how to treat crepe myrtle bark scale.
Oh boy.
Oh boy.
It's a pretty widespread thing right now. We talk about it quite a bit, and we've mentioned it here quite a bit. It is a scale insect. What you're seeing now are adults. They have kind of a waxy coating. They feed on the sap of your tree. When they feed on the sap and when they process it, they produce their excrement, which is very high in sugar, and that attracts a sooty mold. So that becomes black and ugly. And a lot of times people will notice that before they notice the insect. It's, what's all this black stuff on my tree? And it's that sooty mold from the excrement. The easiest thing to do with those is a horticultural oil. This time of the year, you have to be careful with that because of the temperature. You can burn the foliage of your plants. If it's a big plant, you might want to get an arborist to come out or a plant healthcare specialist to come and look. There are some insecticides for bigger specimens that work. I often tell people a first line of defense is use high pressure water to kind of disrupt that insect. Once they're adults, they don't move around very much. So if you dislodge them from the plant, they're more than likely aren't going to reattach. It doesn't mean that they won't, but those are some kind of low impact things that will work. If you've got big specimens that require higher reach, I would definitely call a plant healthcare specialist out to take a look at them.
Definitely.
Yeah. I think smaller. Yeah, I'd go the high pressure nozzle now. Yeah. And you can just physically kind of, with a kind of a little bit of rough cloth, kind of wipe a bunch of them off. It's kind of gross, but you can do that. And then the horticultural oil, dormant oil when they're dormant over the winter. But yeah.
I was able to spray a few that we have in the garden, of dwarf ones, in the past week or so with a hort oil. And I've gone back and it's been very effective. Yeah.
Just be mindful of the temperature.
Yeah. And I had to do that in the morning when it was on cooler days that we had, not those 95 degree days. So
exactly.
Let's explore this topic a little further.
Yes.
So fundamentally, the issue is we have way too many crepe myrtles planted.
Correct.
And it's basically a monoculture, not enough biodiversity. Let's say we, progress past the whole crepe myrtle phase that we're in. What are some good replacements for crepe myrtles that have a lot of the same virtues of crepe myrtles that, just aren't crepe myrtles? Let's hear everybody's opinion.
Oh, you actually, this becomes part of the issue is that crepe myrtles really are, the reason they're overused is because they really are pretty great trees.
They're awesome trees.
In fact, we sometimes get sick of them because there's so many of them being used, but it is a really good 4-season plant. There are some that I'd look at, I'll throw out a few that I like looking at flowering trees. I like the Cornelian cherries, Cornus moss and officinalis. You get very early bright gold flowers, nice habit. Red fruits on it, and then it's got really good winter bark. So I like that as kind of a thing. You don't get all the flowering during the summer, but let's face it, you got a lot of other things flowering during the summer. One JC really pushed that gives a long season of interest is Eucaphus japonica, which can be hard to find, but it's kind of makes a funky growing tree. It needs a little bit of pruning to get it really looking good as a young plant, but then it flowers with really pretty white flowers, followed by these red pods with black that open up. Excuse me, am I getting that right? Yeah, red pods that open up with black seeds. And I actually was giving a talk up at the North Carolina Arboretum up in Asheville, and drove into the parking lot. It was in the fall, late summer, early fall, and I thought it was a crepe myrtle in full bloom. It was in full seed. It was so showy. It really looked like a crepe myrtle. It was that red.
Dark on it, because I think at least on the younger stems, they tend to have lines on them, and it seems somewhat interesting to look at both.
Yeah, I think it's beautiful. The bark can get beautiful. It starts to get kind of scaly and peely as it gets older. A little like Cornus moss. Sometimes it's called Korean sweetheart tree, but It's hard to find because nobody ever asked for a Eucaphus, but
It's awkward as a young plant.
and it's awkward as a young plant.
It's really angular.
Yeah.
Dennis, you have a Lagerstromia fariae in your front yard. Let's say it gets completely obliterated. What are you replacing it with?
So that's a big plant. So I would just replace it with a tree,
Which tree?
like a yellowwood or.
Okay.
I was going to say, if I had to plant one, kind of medium to large tree, it would be a yellowwood cladrastus.
Yeah, or a ginkgo. There are some, not so huge ones. Vitex Agnus cassis chase tree is a good one. There's another one that's way overused, Loropetalum, but that functionally would fit the same space a crepe myrtle would fit, but I wouldn't do it because they're overused as much as crepe myrtles are almost here in Raleigh.
Believe it or not, Loropetalums are not just little 2 or 3 foot shrubs that actually grow 6 or 8 feet that you keep trying to prune to 3 feet. They naturally are trees, and some of the older ones were actual trees, and you grow them as single stem or 3 stems, multi stems, and they make beautiful small trees.
The bark on that too is, again, it's exfoliating.
Yeah. They can be, some of them can be a little weak wooded. So during our ice storms, they will break apart, unlike a crepe myrtle, which won't, but we'll do less of. So that's a downside of Loropetalum too.
Yeah.
And I would say we've got some, if you want color all season, we've got some great introductions from the Arboretum. Some of our red buds, brand new one this year, Gilded Hearts, is the Texas form of red bud with thicker leaves. You can grow it out in full sun. It looks great. You get the strain red bud, the pink flowers in the spring. We got a new series called the Garden Gems, which are smaller. If you don't want a great big tree, but more something like a weeping Japanese maple size. Got both purple leaf and green leaf ones of those, which are really nice.
Hayes Early Hope has a kind of a
More
crepe myrtle shape to it.
No kidding.
Trunk as well.
Yeah, the Chinese red bud that we introduced, Hayes Early Hope, as
for so long.
just a flowering machine, and it's got that multi-stem. Yeah.
Nancy wants to know, what about serviceberry?
I always forget about serviceberry as a great plant, but it really is. If you get it in the right spot, I find it a little bit happier in cooler climates mostly.
You get a lot of foliar diseases, leaf spot and rust, things like
The
that.
fruit will get rust. And then you don't get to eat them.
Yeah.
I ate my first serviceberry ever here off one of our plants just last year. I'd never had one before.
It's straight out from your office.
I know, it's right out from my office. But yeah, it's in the rose family, so it gets some diseases. But it is a great
sucker.
Some of them will sucker.
Some of them are multi-branch. You can get more arboreal forms as well.
Yeah,
And there's several different species throughout the United States, and they have slightly different habits.
Yeah.
May have not been a good spot.
Yeah, but if you live up in the north, serviceberry is awesome up there. 100%. Okie dokie. We got a question that came in from the internet, as a matter of fact, from one of our YouTube videos. Matt says that he currently has a few 8-foot tall little gem magnolias along a fence line, which is north of a forested 10-foot buffer zone. He says the magnolias are sparse on the inside and with foliage, and they're kind of leaning west. So he's thinking it's too shaded for them, and he wants to know if Magnolia Serendipity would be a better choice. He's wondering if it would still be dense enough for privacy with just fewer flowers, or with just a lot of shade.
But I will say first about the little gems. The leaning is a sign that they want more sun. The sparseness of the interior, that's a little gem.
Yeah.
That's
Not dense plants.
That's just little gem.
For sure. The one out behind the necessary right now, it's pretty sparse. It is shooting out adventitious growth from the trunk, but it's not looking like those are going to be its new branches or anything.
Yeah, due to the fact that it has light now since we did major renovations.
Right. Yeah, for sure.
It's making new branches.
There's much better cultivars.
Yeah.
But so with the little amount of light that he has, do you think?
I mean, the Magnolia Figos and I think Serendipity is a Figo hybrid, if I remember right. Tend to be a little bit more shade
A
tolerant.
little more forgiving.
And yes, and they flower very well. So
And then,
But
they
it
do
will
well
be
as
more
screening.
open in a shaded area than
Yeah, anything's going to be more, but I think that plan is underutilized in terms of using it as.
if you do need
Yeah.
to keep it and shape it too, it's a whole lot easier to shape it, I think, than that of a Magnolia grandiflora, which is going to be so coarse if you have to shear it. You could literally shear a serendipity and have, the flesh will be so quick back that it would not look bad.
Yeah, I think that would work. Some other things, if you wanted the Magnolia grandiflora look, I'd look at Southern Charm or Teddy Bear, however it's sold. That's a really dense, tight form.
Cape Harris is good.
Cape Harris is a great one.
We have that in, I'd say, half shade, and it's been fairly dense. Cape Harris.
And then Elysiums are always good. They're just our native Elysium, Floridanum and Parviflorum.
Or ilex, like Vomitoria or Opaca. Both they're both native, and they would kind of give a different texture.
Yeah, definitely.
Texture.
And some other evergreen, Calmia. And if you can grow a rhododendron, if you have the right spot for it, a rhododendron, some of them get real big and those are also evergreen and they flower and they don't flower at the same time as the magnolia, but
Old school camellias too.
Yes, camellias you can't go wrong around here. And they'll take the shade.
They sure will. Okie dokie. Sophia wants any advice on which cultivars of fuchsias can thrive here? They seem to suffer with the heat and if too much rain falls on them. And can one revive them if they become wilted after too much rain falling on them?
Oh, okay. So fuchsias, I only found a couple that have done fairly well for us. And Sandyhoff being the best one that we have here in the garden. I know there's a few others in the same breeding program, but that's one that's been taking our weather. It takes our 90s and 100s and still flowers. That'll typically outright kill a lot of fuchsias. We have another one, Hatchapachii.
And that's Sandyhoff is the cultivar name, but it's sold as Angel Earrings Cascading. So that's what you'd look for. And that is by far the best of the best that we've found.
Yeah. And that one's been Sandyhoff and then Hatchapachii have been pretty good on our lath house structure. And I've seen them in other gardens around here doing quite well.
Oh, the Angel Earrings Cascading will sucker over time if you let it. And I've got a big patch of it in my garden. It's beautiful. And we've sowed out seed from it.
I was looking at one though. They haven't had the heat tolerance. They've looked crappy.
Yeah.
Some of the ones. So I was looking at one this morning in the lath house that we planted out.
The ones in the nursery that have looked good.
They have not. They did not get that.
They don't look good.
Yeah. And just to go back to the original kind of question, the issue is not water. The issue is the heat. Fuchsia love water.
Okay.
I remember when I worked in a retail nursery, we grew some of our own annuals, and we would always put the fuchsia baskets under where the drip heads were that didn't like to shut off, and we'd keep dripping. And those would be the biggest ones because they were just getting water kind of nonstop. But once it gets hot, they're all dead.
Yeah. So most of them shut down at about 90 degrees. And we don't have 90-degree days here anymore. We have 95 to 100-degree days here. So
Hot.
Honestly.
And that just wipes them out.
Okie dokie. Carol wants to know, when should I cut sucker shoots from my Constellation Dogwoods trunk?
Anytime.
Yeah, anytime. Interestingly, I always told people you never do any kind of pruning, late season going into fall. And our former director here, Ted Bilderback, who's done a lot of research on that kind of work, actually said that if you time it right and prune in the fall right as things are beginning to shut down, or shortly before that, the plant doesn't have time to kind of send more energy into where those suckers are. And he'd use that for if you're doing some small like cutting back branches that were trying to compete with the main stem, that kind of thing. And it would the next season when things got up and started going, the tips, the apical meristems, that's where it wants to send its energy. And so it would tend to send more energy there than to where it suckers. But I don't have the patience for that. I just cut them off whenever I see them.
Honestly, they're called suckers because they suck the life from the tree. So might as well just get them out while you're getting them out. Alrighty. So Paul says with heat tolerance of dogwoods and red buds, it's not up to our increasingly hot summers, especially in the southeastern part of the state. What do you recommend as replacements for dogwoods and red buds?
I think they do fine.
That's what I would think too.
Yeah.
Because like I read that the Cornus or Cercis doesn't do well in Europe because it doesn't get hot enough over there. Like the wood can't ripen. And so over in Europe, temperatures that it sails through over here just like zap it over there because it doesn't have the ripening. And
things that hurt dogwoods are planting too deep, watering too much sun in some situations.
Sure.
But most of the new dogwood cultivars that are in the market are much more resistant to powdery mildew, which is probably the worst thing that affects dogwoods. But keeping them stress-free is the key to success with them.
This is Paul Sotero. I had dinner with him at the Southeastern Plant Symposium. His soil is just sand, basically. And
yeah, that might be why. And they like acidic pH. Red buds are, you plant them the right way, you give them a little bit of organic matter and get them established. They're fairly trouble-free.
And maybe going with the.
Go ahead.
I was going to say maybe going with the Texensis types and if you can find the Mexicanus forms, you may have some more, at least if you are worried about the heat tolerance.
Yeah, agree. Yeah, I agree. There are some issues with them, some disease issues and things that may get very bad, may not wind up being big deals, but that's not a heat issue.
And the Cusa cultivars are perfectly fine in heat.
Yeah.
Okie dokie. So Deborah is looking for viburnum nativars. Anything exciting to look for? Evergreen and small sizes are a plus.
So Viburnum obovatum Raulston Select, which is one we've introduced here as a mutation. Raulston Hardy, which is a mutation from Mrs. Schiller's Delight. It's a very good it's southeastern native. It's not native right in this area. It's semi-evergreen, flowers over a fairly long period off and on through the winter and into spring. So it's there at a different time of the season than a lot of the other viburnums. And it tends to be quite compact.
Yeah.
Viburnum nudum is one of my favorites. It can take a little bit of wet. It can take dry. Great fall color. It's deciduous. Really nice fruit set. There's a cultivar called Winterberries that's really nice. There's other cultivars, but that's a really nice native one.
Oh, was it a nudum that was all that glitters? It had that thick.
That's dentatum.
Was it a
dentatum? All that glitters was really nice. Yeah. It's a native one. Just going back, this goes with dentatum and nudum and really other ones where the fruit is a real something you really want to encourage. We talk about with if you buy blueberries or brambles or apples, they say plant more than one kind. You get better pollination, and we see that with hollies. It's true if you can get viburnum nudum brandywine, Winterberries, like you said, and then add to that brandywine or one of the other ones, or just seedling grown ones, and plant several of them. You'll get a little bit different appearance. You get a little bit different fall color, but you'll have many more fruits than if you just plant one. Viburnum dentatum. If you grow several of those together, all that glitters is amazing. Michael Dodge with yellow berries. If you grow it with other ones around, the fruit set is just insane and it's gorgeous. But we tend to always say, okay, I'm going to plant a hedge. I'm going to plant all the same thing, or I'm going to plant one. And you really should plant multiples in the vicinity, and you're of different ones, and they can be different cultivars. Yeah. Yeah, if you can find them. I'm trying to think. There's some good compact hybrids with natives, but they're hybrids with natives and Asian ones. I'm trying to think of some other smaller ones.
Like Black Haw, Arrowwood, those are some of the natives that don't get super big.
Yeah.
And a lot of the native plant nurseries carry those pretty much. They're becoming easier to find.
For sure. Okie dokie. So we did have a question. That was a comment left on the Deeper in the Garden on salvias that Tim did a couple of weeks ago. You mentioned salvias creeping into the rose garden. They say Sarah Raven says she intentionally plants salvia with her roses because she thinks it cuts down on diseases and pests with the roses. Is there any evidence of that here at the JCRA?
I think it helps with pests.
In general, yeah. If you just break up the roses themselves, keep them from getting too close, it won't hurt. And you bring in beneficials by having those other flowering plants in there.
That's the
diversity in there. Anything you can add will increase your beneficial diversity as well. So.
And the roses bloom for little windows. The herbaceous stuff carries that kind of static garden through all the seasons.
Nice.
And it's not monoculture that way.
Yeah.
Sure. And there was another comment on that video that was about, you mentioned, Tim, a salvia that's in the scleria subgroup that's across from the rose garden, and it looks like a giant Nemerosa type.
Darn, I didn't look it up. I'm sorry.
No. Oh, jeez.
And I just cut them all back yesterday with the volunteers. But
well, they asked because they'd not had luck with the Nemerosas in Savannah, Georgia.
Oh, okay.
And they were wondering.
If they're wanting to have trouble, I would try the Blue Bayou. Okay. That has been a standout to me in the trials, in the trial beds themselves, and in the beds in the garden. It is. I mean, I poo-pooed Numerosa types for the longest time down here because we had so many better ones. But I really like Blue Bayou.
Blue Bayou has been great in my garden, and if you want that look, one that a different plant that I really like is the Bettany Stachy's, like Stachy's orientalis, not lamb's ears, that type of Stachy's, but the green leaf ones that make nice clumps and have those flowers like the Nemerosa. And I just cut them back as soon as they finish flowering. They'll pop back up and usually flower for me again, and doing pinks and whites and blues.
A little different shape of a plant, the salvia, would be maybe try Salvia comedrioides down there. It's a silver-leafed one, semi-woody. I don't know. It might give you, at least it's cobalt blue. I mean, instead of purples, but it might be something else to try too. It's compact. Try Blue Bayou.
Okay.
And if you're in North Carolina, speaking of clary sage, there is actually some pretty significant production of clary sage for perfume in North Carolina. And I've mentioned this before on a midweek program. I didn't know it, and I was driving from Raleigh to southeastern Virginia, and I didn't want to take any highway, so I was cutting diagonally, going by little small roads, and almost wrecked my car because picture a field of corn or soybeans or whatever agronomic crop like that, except for it was in full bloom and it was purple. And then there was a field, most of it was purple, but then I'd hit a field that was all pink, a field that was all white. It's an astonishing sight and worth driving out and making a day of going out in the country and seeing that.
Is that May, June?
It was probably June.
Sure. That sounds right. When I was an intern in college, we were doing a research study at a bunch of different nurseries throughout the state. We went out to Eastern North Carolina, and this was in the summer, and I got to see a field like that. The clary sage is in full bloom. Was not expecting it. Certainly,
exactly.
Yeah, for sure. You're just in this part of the state where everything's just kind of flat. Well, we were at huge wholesale nurseries where it's just fields of boxwoods, basically, and then all of a sudden it's like, here we go, just an explosion of purple, and it's really something else. Okie dokie. Will Fuchsia japonica transplant? Not now, but when it's cooler. And what should they watch out for when you're transplanting?
Transplant
Transplants pretty easily.
Yeah.
The big things are they've got great big evergreen leaves, so they dry out if you're not careful. If it gets really cold and really windy, where wind is the biggest issue. You can cut them back. I have done that. They are so slow to return to anything.
So where's this person at, though? Do we know?
Not sure.
If they're at the coast, they grow like weeds.
I would wait till
they once you cut them back, they do not come back fast because they just do one flush a year, and it takes them a while to make the buds for that real good flush. And so it is several years.
Moving them in early fall where you can still keep an eye on watering, and they're not going to go into that cold part of the winter. They can establish their new are going to seek their roots and keep them moist enough. I've had success doing that.
So you're saying like late September, early October?
Early to mid-September.
Okay, and not waiting as late as you would for other things to go dormant.
Yeah, if we have a cold winter, within a typical range, but a cold winter, They can suffer if you move them, too late. That's another one where I would tend towards moving it in early spring and going. I think it'd be fine, but you'd be fine doing it. But I agree with you.
Both those windows it's kind of the same perfect case scenario for the weather. It's still kind of cool enough that they're not going to get dry in the spring. Either of those timeframes, I think, would.
And then they'll already start to root back in and become established before the desiccation of the winter.
Yeah.
Or the heat of summer.
Right.
I work for someone who, I don't know how you feel about wilt proof, but she swore by wilt proofing big leaves before transplanting.
We use that on boxwoods a lot.
What's wilt proof?
It's an anti-desiccant that you spray in your leaves.
Do you know what it is?
It's some kind of an oil.
It's like a wax.
It's like a waxy.
Yeah. Okay.
And
it just slows down transpiration.
Yeah, it does.
Okay. Well, alrighty. Let's keep on rolling with these questions. We'll pull another one that came in from a YouTube video, Mark's YouTube video about Hypertufa troughs. They say that they've seen people immerse Hypertufa in water after a 24 to 48 hour set time, and they leave it in there for weeks or months. What do you say about that?
Yeah, I thought I had briefly mentioned that sometimes people do that. They do that to leach some of the alkalinity out of it. I say that sounds like a lot of work.
It might depend what you ultimately want to plant in it too. If you want something that's needs a higher pH.
Yeah, I agree. But
if you're doing an acid growing,
some of these, if you think about a lot of the acid growing plants from North Carolina mountains, from Asia, they grow on limestone. So it's always confused me how I think it's really about nutrient availability more than the actual pH itself.
Yeah, that makes sense. We were filming hydrangeas earlier this morning talking about how if there's not aluminum in the substrate, it doesn't matter what the pH is, it's not going to turn it blue.
Right.
Kind of seems like the same kind of principle.
And a neutral pH is good for uptake of nutrients. The pH will affect how things take things up. So the more alkaline, it's
definitely. Okie dokie. Let's see. Sasha is wondering if Eternal Spring Magnolia would survive in central Connecticut, zone 6B. The research says zone 7, but they were wondering if that's flexible at all. And Mark is shaking his head.
I am shaking my head no.
You could always try.
Thinking I would try it. I have plenty of things planted at my house that are not supposed to be hardy. And one of these days we're going to have a winter and I'm going to have a whole lot of planting space.
You sure are.
So
you could take advantage of a microclimate, a nice corner that's a little bit protected.
Are they coastal?
Or something that's protected by other plants and a nice overhang of plant material. But like Mark said, inevitably Mother Nature is going to do the slap on the back of the head saying,
that's not the worst thing in the world. Yeah. How many of us have plants, like a pile of plants that they need to go in the ground, but where are we going to put them? When are we going to do it? Wait till after a big killing freeze. And then it's all up to you.
I will say at least it reflowers fairly well. So if it does get some major damage, but not killed, it might actually reflower a little bit.
Yeah.
But it could
I would try it if I were them. Find some
I wouldn't do a big plant. I would do small.
And like a lot of woody plants, if you plant it and we have several mild winters, you have several mild winters up there. In my head, anything north of Maryland is the frozen tundra. So, but if you have some mild winters and it does come through pretty well and it gets some size on it, then when you have a cold winter there's a little bit more beef there to recover from.
Sure. And I started my horticulture career fascinated with bonsai and just looking at annual plants. Why would you go through the effort to plant out plants that are just going to die every year? It didn't make any sense to me. But then, I kind of spent more time around plants, spent more time seeing beautiful annual displays. And it's like, oh, those are beautiful plants. They're certainly worth the effort, certainly worth putting them in, even if it's only for a limited amount of time. Just set your expectations. Even if it's technically perennial, you can still enjoy it for a season if it's only going to last.
Depends on how much care the person wants to put into this plant.
Yeah.
I on Facebook, I'm on some zone pushing things, and it's they're growing palms that are 15 feet tall in Pittsburgh.
No
that is
kidding.
Trachycarpus, and they put boxes over them every year.
Yeah.
Every year.
So
I'm
yeah,
thinking if you could make it a sweater, but like,
Heyo.
it's like
Yeah.
if you're
I mean,
willing to put in that effort, if you're willing to put in the effort and you know you're getting a really bad cold spell, like cover it.
That sounds like a great retirement plan.
Here you go. Here's what you can do, and I'm doing this.
Get a refrigerator box and a little.
I have got some plants, and I always tell people I don't grow plants in containers. I have got some plants in containers that are not hardy for me. I know they're not hardy for me, but they mean a lot to me.
Mm-hmm.
So I am in the process, and I've been doing this, it seems like every day that it is over 95 degrees, digging a cold frame. So digging 5 to 6 feet deep so I can put my plant down there because, you know, the air temperature stays stable when you get down low. But, you know, you got to get low enough that the tops aren't getting, you know, aren't at level. So I got to get it down low enough. And, you know, now all of a sudden I'm like, ooh, maybe I'll put this other thing in here. And maybe. So I know where I've hit the first layer of kind of the broken bedrock in my garden. I haven't had to get a pick out yet. And I am about 4.5 feet deep. So
What
got
do
another.
your neighbors think?
That's what I'm thinking. The same thing. I'm thinking that looking out and seeing just the top of his head and just sweat so
Well, it's
glasses.
beside my house. I'm on a cul-de-sac. Only one person can see it, and they already know I'm crazy. But
Sure. You look over in our Japanese garden, we have cycads that don't do good out in full sun here, but they're tucked away in a little corner, protecting them from wind, protecting them from cold, you know, and they get through it. They survive quite well. But let's continue talking about plants that can make it here but aren't supposed to. What are some examples of ones that you've tried?
I had a weird acacia starlet that was like, you said something about it.
yeah,
Like growing along the entry drive to where I used to work.
yeah,
And it's
Acacia
like,
farnesiana.
yes.
Oh my gosh, that is the most beautiful plant. It comes out, it's like purple and then blue. Finally, it's gorgeous. Never been able to grow that plant.
Yeah, and just happy. It's in a protected corner. It's got cryptomeria around it, a little bit high, and right on the main drag where I could kind of keep an eye on it, and just like amazed that it made it through winter after winter after winter. Some of the weird evergreen magnolias I've tried to limp along and kill. Things that I got from some of our crazy magnolia colleagues in South Carolina and beyond would send me things, and I'm surprised that they limped along for as long as they have.
Yeah.
I mean, I just amazed Exbucklandia makes it here. Because most of it isn't it Southern Asia, Southeast Asia?
Yeah.
Malaysian poplar.
Yeah. Yeah. Exbucklandia, a very weird member of the witch hazel family. We've got one growing right outside of our
hard years.
Our front entrance. And I've got one that I collected in very South China, and I had it growing right up next to my house because I did not think it was going to be very hardy. It shot up pretty quickly to about 12, 15 feet and blew over one winter, actually. I dug it up, I moved it into my woodland, planted it, staked it up, never missed a beat. It's been 6 or 7 years in my garden.
I think we put one maybe right over here in the berm somewhere.
Mm-hmm.
Yes. Got a new planting of it out here. You know, the cycads that you mentioned, some of those have been really surprising. I would have never thought we could grow those.
I've had a few. I used to work at Plant Delights, and Tony was collecting weird aspidistras. I guess he still is.
Sure.
And I ended up with some of the extras at my house from Vietnam and other places, and
Yeah.
they're slow to emerge, really slow, but
No doubt.
they've survived for many years. So,
Tony's got a lot of weird stuff that he pushes. I know we took a tour there last year for the Triangle Area Gardens lunch. He had lithops growing outdoors in North Carolina. They were planted underneath rocks so that they stayed completely dry in the wintertime. And
they had been growing them in Denver too.
No kidding?
Yeah.
Sure.
I don't know if they're still there, but I saw them.
And that's one I want to try, but I have not tried, but I really, really want to try, kind of in the same vein of that lithops where it never gets water. is the weird conifer Welwitschia. It just grows with two leaves.
Yeah.
It grows in the Nambian desert in those red sand dunes you see in pictures and movies and things, in just the most inhospitable site, never gets a touch of water. But if you overlay kind of the historical geography of those areas, they grow on the rims of where there used to be lakes. And I just wonder if they will survive extreme drought, but if they would actually tolerate a little bit more water than we think that they would. But probably you'd want to protect them as much as possible. But where they were growing on when it was lake edges, it was much colder in those areas as well. So it may have retained some hardiness, and just got to get one big enough to plant outside.
No kidding. Nothing ventured, nothing gained, Mark.
That's right.
We want to learn about these Welwitchianas. We got to get them in the garden.
Yeah.
Okay. Erica wants to know if there are any recommendations on how to grow Crataegus monogona in the southeastern U.S. That is common hawthorn.
That's another.
Is that the European? Where's that one from? Is that American or is that European?
I think it's native. I don't know.
Native to Europe, northwestern Africa, and western Asia.
Yeah, Crataegus really suffer in our neck of the woods.
Yeah,
it's it's a rosaceous plant. They get all the rust diseases and fire blights and all that stuff.
Sure.
A local plant guru from the mountains, Ron Lance, has done a lot of work on some of the native ones, and they perform pretty well. I know Adam Black has also looked at some that he's found in Texas and other places. It's an interesting plant. It's got a great flower, and a lot of the cultivars are used in the Midwest and the Northeast as street trees. They just don't do well here at all.
Unless you're on the Mayhaw or the Haw River, where all the Mayhaws.
That's true.
But I mean, that's all our native ones again.
Right.
It's like those European ones.
They just don't. It's too.
Yeah.
And you got to watch out. I've stayed away from them because Ernest Wilson, in the later years of his life, went down rabbit holes with the native Crataegus, and he started naming like 30 different Crataegus that were growing on the same hillside in the U.S. And he just started splitting them into all kinds of species and things. So
They
I
hybridize
stayed away.
readily, don't they?
Yeah, I agree. They don't. They're better plants for us.
Sure. Well, I was going to say, speaking of better plants, but I do like Crataegus. It's a wonderful plant. But another wonderful plant, witch hazels. Which types do well here?
Intermediates.
Yeah, the intermediate hybrids are really, really good. There's a lot of new cultivars of some of our native ones, Virginiana. They perform really, really well. They're not the easiest to find. There used to be a couple of really good mail order nurseries that grew them. And one of them is no longer with us. The other one is not growing that many of them. There's so many different cultivars. There's red ones, orange ones, burgundy ones.
What's the one outside your office? The pink one.
That's
Or red one.
I can't remember the name now.
The
We used to have this Shibamichi red, but we've got an actual name on it.
That is spectacular to me.
Yeah,
it looks like a deciduous lower petal.
you can get amethyst is kind of similar to that.
I don't think it's intense.
The amethyst is different than the one we had. The one
it's an amethyst is American.
Yeah, I haven't found any that are bad. I like it when they're grown on their own roots, which you hardly ever get. If they're on their own roots, they don't sucker as bad.
Yep.
Most are grafted, though, because you can get a saleable plant quicker if you graft it. And so you get suckers coming up from the rootstock. So all of a sudden, your plant that has beautiful red flowers will start having branches with these measly little yellow ones. And if you follow it back, it's because it's coming up below from below the roots.
And they'll also use Parodia, as I'm looking at one straight.
Yeah.
Suckering Parodia.
Yeah. I love the plants, and what I do, because I don't have much room for plants, is in the winter you can see where all the flower buds are. They're little, kind of stalk buds on there, and the flower buds form on last year's growth. So we'll get more flower buds the following year, or what grows out that summer. So I will cut back to halfway, like kind of between the tip of the branch and halfway back to where the flower buds start, and just keep my plants compact that way. And they seem to produce a lot more flowers the next year. And I just get the really intense but smaller plants that way. They take up less space.
Nice.
There are some dwarf ones too. There's one called Quasimodo that's kind of nice.
Yeah.
Right there.
He's over there. Yeah, he's a cutie.
Yeah.
Little,
there was one in
little
the
Susie.
Yeah, Susie.
Yeah.
That's the one I'm thinking of. That's a really, really nice one. Yeah, I love witch hazels. Great fall color.
I like the vernalis and the intermediate, the winter spring winter spring flowering ones. Our native Virginianas. I mean, I grew up with them. They kind of just blend into the forest.
They're not as showy.
Yeah, they're not as showy, but they are cool.
I like the non-hybrid japonicas and mollis because they tend to be the most fragrant.
Yep.
The intermedias are
Intermediate.
sometimes fragrant, sometimes not, mostly not very.
And that's always the saddest thing when you stick your nose in a witch hazel and it disappoints. It's crushing, soul crushing.
Soul crushing.
They hold their leaves. Some people don't like that, but to me, that's a winter interest thing.
It is, for sure.
No, it isn't.
Well,
It is not interesting at all. I'm sorry. I disagree.
it is a wonderful meditation practice to go through and cut them all off.
Yes, I used to do that at Atlanta Botanic Garden.
And the feeling you get when that's done, you look at the tree as compared to how interesting it was before when it's denuded completely, you feel good. You really do. So either you can appreciate it on its own merits, which is wonderful. Absolutely, Greg. Love that. Or you make it your own. Get something good.
Therapy.
Yeah.
It's very cathartic.
Okay. Alrighty. So everybody loved your small trees for shade garden plant lovers tour, but everybody also wanted to know which small trees for shade gardens don't get eaten by deer.
Well, that's the universal question with everything that we do. Deer have become opportunistic. They will nibble on things that we never would have expected them to nibble on. Either just to kind of see if it's something they can eat, or they've completely depleted their other food sources. There is not a good answer to the question. The best answer is fence your garden in to kind of fight that. I honestly can't think of something off the top of my head that, from a small flowering tree standpoint, that a deer's not gonna maybe nibble on.
Sure.
Part of that issue is pressure. If you live someplace where there are a lot of deer, the pressure to go and eat other things that they normally wouldn't is much, much higher. If you live someplace where your neighbors are bringing them in with corn and other things to feed them, and they start coming there, they're going to be more opportunistic. So there isn't a good list that I can give of things that they're not going to, unfortunately, not going to.
And the list of, it's like what your deer will eat.
Yeah.
Because that list is different. I mean, there are things that people swear their deer don't eat. And it's like, well, they eat that to the ground.
Somebody was telling us last week they're eating the yuccas in their yard.
What?
Yeah. Ever heard of that?
I'd say they must be desperate.
Honestly.
So last week during midweek, our guest Basil said that they were having luck using just stringing marine grade fishing wire about 3 feet off the ground around the perimeter, that it would scare them. They didn't see it, and they'd hit it, and
it works for a week.
I've got 2,000 yards of marine grade 180-pound test fishing line.
Nice.
So I will report back.
If you're going back to the house to get a beverage, you're going to go.
Yeah, or it comes in with a broken ankle.
3 feet high.
Yeah, it's
the perfect height because my dogs can run under it and chase the deer that come close to it.
I tried fishing line at a property I worked at. They just went around it. They just figured it out. Oh, that was my bad.
Cool.
Yeah, they're here to stay, unfortunately.
Sure.
They predate us.
They do.
Well, there's more deer now than there were when Columbus landed in America. The population has grown much
Yeah.
better because there's no
predators.
predators. There's no balance.
So there you go. Get a mountain lion for your garden.
A mountain
And
lion.
there you go. All your plants become deer proof once you have a mountain lion.
Yep. That's a no-brainer.
Amen, brother. Mountain lions.
Okay.
It's a no-brainer.
So this was a
We
comment
don't
that was
condone having mountain lions. Can we just put that in a disclaimer? Can you put that
mountain
on
lions are
flash?
beautiful.
They're
Right.
beautiful, majestic creatures, but
Oh man.
Check your
Much
not
like,
over-
much like
we should
having a
not over
mouse
them.
or of a cat, you can't overfeed them though. You
Yeah.
want them hungry, which makes them
You want
much better pets.
Definitely. So that's a hot tip. If you've got a mountain lion on your property, you want it hungry.
If you want a good gardener, you want them hungry.
For sure. Okay, so there was a question left on one of the old Almanac Gardener clips that JC Raulston did, which was in reference to the old Nellie Stevens holly hedge that we had here. And somebody noted that hedge, they were all multi-stem. And as they understood, they are not multi-stem if they were left alone. So the question is, how do we manage that?
They've been cut back multiple times over the years.
Oh, yeah. Sure enough.
There's one over here that's never been cut to the ground. It's just over this direction. But
Sure.
it's not part of the original hedge.
Right. But yeah, so it is single trunk,
Yeah.
but it's as simple as
It's
pruning it.
35, 40 feet tall.
They can take very severe pruning.
Sure enough.
Yep.
Absolutely. Okay. Well, we're close enough to the end of our program and we've answered plenty of questions.
Somebody
So
turned the heat up.
they did. It was
The sun shifted. We were in the
It did.
sun over here when we started. Now,
Yeah, I'm
we're
fine now.
better over
Okay.
here now.
Water.
Okay. Yeah.
It's
well,
Anyway,
water's rolling off of me.
thank you so much, all y'all, for joining us
Thank
on
you.
this rousing horticulture hour. It was wonderful to
Yeah.
have so many wonderful guests here on the program today. And thank you, everybody, for joining us today for the midweek program. We will be back next week. Greg and Sophia will be going over how to pick plants in the nursery. So that should be very useful for the home gardener who's hunting for new plants. So be sure to join us next week. We will see you all then. Y'all take care.